Dante, Blaze, Mercado vanished without a trace. Emilio, Ghost, Vargas left bodies with no witnesses. Ricardo, Slick Rick, Mendoza moved millions without a paper trail. Together, they built the Crimson Vultures, California's most dangerous and untouchable gang. In the heart of East Los Angeles, where desperation and ambition collide under the shadow of gang-tagged buildings and flickering streetlights, a name began to echo through the alleyways and underground whispers: Crimson Vultures. This wasn't just another group of angry young men with handguns and bandanas. This was something colder, more deliberate. It didn't start with violence. It started with a man named Dante, Blaze, Mercado, and a plan built in silence. Dante had grown up in the smog-filled projects of Boyle Heights, where crime was currency and survival meant adapting early. By 17, he was working as a courier for a powerful Mexican cartel, running packages across the border with nerves of steel and a mind sharp enough to memorize entire city maps. He saw how power worked. He saw that the streets weren't controlled by the loudest, but by the most calculating. And most of all, he saw how gangs collapsed from within, not because of enemies, but because of ego and chaos. That's where he planned to be different. When the cartel he worked for began to fall apart due to internal betrayal, Dante disappeared for almost 2 years. Rumors circulated that he'd been killed. Others believed he'd flipped and joined the DA. But when he reappeared in 2004, he came back with more than just tattoos and scars. He came back with blueprints. Dante handpicked the first members of his gang with the precision of a chess master. He didn't want loudmouths or fame chasers. He wanted ghosts. People with no digital history, no paper trail, and nothing to lose. Ex-cons with military training. Homeless runaways hardened by the streets. Former cartel grunts who had gone rogue. He offered them 3 things: protection, purpose, and a future built on order. They started by infiltrating nightclubs and low-level meth markets around Vernon and Huntington Park. No flashy drive-bys, no turf wars. Blaze used coded phrases, burner phones, and digital payment systems. The money flowed in slowly, then all at once. He funneled it through fake cleaning businesses and junkyards, investing in legitimate properties while the streets never heard his name. Even within the group, very few had met him. Most knew him only by voice or rumors. And that mystery only fueled their loyalty. To ensure loyalty, Blaze enforced a brutal but effective rule: the 3 strikes law. The first strike got you benched. The second brought pain. The third got you erased. There were no exceptions, and he lived by it too. When one of his closest recruits, a former car thief named Leo Sticks Gonzales, tried skimming off drug money to buy himself a new car, Blaze had him disappear without ceremony. The message was clear. This wasn't about friendship. It was about the mission. Within 3 years, the Crimson Vultures controlled drug routes from Echo Park to Compton. But they didn't parade their power. They cloaked it. Where other gangs relied on graffiti to mark turf, the Vultures used signals: a red feather sticker on a lamppost, a specific garbage can tipped on its side, or a beat-up car with one headlight flashing. These symbols meant everything to insiders, and nothing to the police. What set the Crimson Vultures apart was their ability to work like a corporation. Blaze divided the gang into units. The runners moved product. The watchers monitored police activity. The cleaners erased problems. And the archivists, a group very few knew existed, collected information on rivals, law enforcement, and even politicians. Blaze wanted to know everything. He believed that information was power, and in his world, that power was survival. By 2008, whispers of the Crimson Vultures began surfacing in LAPD gang unit meetings. But the problem was, they couldn't pin anything. No tags, no turf battles, no arrests with matching tattoos. They were like smoke, seen by everyone, touched by none. As Blaze watched other gangs burn themselves down with internal rivalries, flashy stunts, and bloody feuds, he remained a ghost. He moved from one safe house to another, never staying more than 3 days. He refused to keep personal phones, carried no ID, and communicated only through encrypted messages or voice-only conversations. Even his most trusted lieutenant had never seen him twice in the same month. Yet despite this, every member of the Crimson Vultures knew one thing for certain: Blaze was watching. Always. He didn't lead from the front, he led from everywhere. What began as a small circle of silent criminals was now evolving into something far more sinister. Something precise. Something powerful. And as the city slept unaware, The Crimson Vultures had already sunk their claws into the streets, the ports, and the veins of Los Angeles. The gang had been born, not in fire, but in planning, and under the careful gaze of a man who believed that chaos was only useful when it was controlled. And Blaze was just getting started. The Crimson Vultures' rise was anything but accidental. Every move was planned, every risk calculated. But as their operations grew, so did the threats. Other gangs began to notice the sudden shift in the city's underworld. Drug routes were being taken, suppliers were switching sides, and money was flowing in one direction, toward the Vultures. Blaze knew that in order to protect the empire he was building, he needed a weapon stronger than fear. He needed precision. That's when Emilio, Ghost, Vargas entered the picture. Ghost wasn't recruited like the others. He was delivered. A contact from Blaze's cartel days recommended him. A man who didn't speak unless absolutely necessary and killed with such silence that victims often didn't realize they were dying until it was too late. Ghost had been a hitman in Tijuana, working independently, eliminating targets for drug lords, politicians, and businessmen alike. No photos existed of him in any government files, no prints, no DNA, just a trail of unnamed corpses. When Ghost arrived in Los Angeles, the Crimson Vultures changed overnight. Before, they had been a ghost organization. Now they had a ghost enforcer. The first sign of his presence came in early 2010, when two rival gang leaders were found executed inside a car parked outside a taco stand in East LA. Both had been shot once in the heart, no signs of a struggle, and a single red handprint smeared across the windshield. The symbolism was clear. This wasn't random violence. It was a message, a warning, and a signature. The LAD created a new task force that same month, believing a serial killer was on the loose. They were wrong. It wasn't a killer. It was a system. Ghost worked alone. He didn't ask questions. He didn't take orders from anyone except Blaze. What made him terrifying wasn't just his efficiency, but his invisibility. Security cameras always seemed to malfunction around him. Witnesses either vanished or remembered nothing, and those who dared speak about him often disappeared within days. The Crimson Vultures began enforcing strict discipline within their ranks. No drug use by members, no impulsive crimes, no social media. Every crew had designated times to move product, collect payments, and report back to their handlers. Blaze turned the gang into a machine, and Ghost was the blade that kept it sharp. To outsiders, they looked like ghosts. To rivals, they were monsters. But it wasn't just violence that strengthened their grip, it was control. Blaze and his second, command Ricardo, Slick Rick, Mendoza, developed a financial web so complex it took experts years to untangle even the surface. Rick had once worked on Wall Street before being caught in a fraud scandal. Disgraced and broke, he was exactly the kind of man Blaze could use, smart, broken, and dangerous. Slick Rick created shell corporations, fake nonprofits, and offshore accounts that allowed the Vultures to launder millions without raising a single red flag. Real estate, nightclubs, used car dealerships, everything became a funnel for their profits. By the time law enforcement even noticed something was wrong, the money was already clean, and the trail had gone cold. Ghost, meanwhile, eliminated any obstacle in their path. Drug dealers who owed money, rivals making threats, suppliers thinking of switching sides. No court cases, no warnings, just silence. Fear began to spread, not because the Vultures shouted, but because they didn't need to. They didn't leave bodies everywhere. They left examples. And every red handprint painted across a body or a building was another chapter in the growing legend of a gang that seemed untouchable. In the span of just a few years, the Crimson Vultures weren't just a gang anymore. They were a myth, a shadow over the city, run by a man no one could find and protected by one no one could stop. By 2014, the Crimson Vultures had become more than a criminal organization. They were a myth that haunted both the streets and the authorities trying to trace them. But no empire, no matter how carefully constructed, is immune to betrayal. Inside the Vulture's smooth, running machine, a crack was beginning to form. And it started with a name no one suspected: Maya Reyes. Maya had been part of the Vultures for nearly 5 years. She wasn't involved in violence. Her job was numbers, transferring funds, keeping track of laundered money, and ensuring the paper trail always led nowhere. To most, she was just Blaze's quiet accountant, a background figure with no real power. But she held the keys to the kingdom. knowing where every dollar went, which shell company owned what, and how much was hidden where. What no one knew was that Maya had been working with the FBI for over a year. Her younger brother had died of a fentanyl overdose in 2012. The drugs that killed him had been traced back to one of the Crimson Vultures' local operations. That loss changed everything. Maya used her position inside the organization to turn against it. She didn't tell anyone, not even her closest friends. Her grief became her mission, and she played her role so well that Blaze continued to trust her completely. Through a hidden connection with a special FBI task force, Maya passed along key information routes used to transport drugs, the names of mid-level operators, even floor plans of major stash houses. She provided login credentials for offshore bank accounts, timestamps for money pickups, and locations where high-level meetings were held. Her intel was so precise, so detailed, that the agency began to believe the entire gang might finally collapse from the inside. The turning point came in late 2014, when Maya revealed the location of a heavily guarded warehouse in Commerce, California. It was more than just a drug stash. It held financial records, weapons, and sensitive files connected to the gang's top members. The FBI moved swiftly, organizing simultaneous raids across 5 properties linked to the Crimson Vultures. The early morning operation sent shockwaves through Los Angeles. Dozens of suspects were arrested. Weapons caches and millions in cash were seized. For the first time, the media openly named the Crimson Vultures as a real threat, not just a street rumor. The LAPD and FBI declared victory, but something was wrong. Despite the scale of the raids, 3 key figures remained missing: Blaze, Ghost, and Slick Rick. It was as if they had vanished before the first door was even kicked open. No traces, no digital footprints, no leads. Authorities believed the raids had been leaked, but they never realized that Blaze had planned for betrayal long before it happened. Maya had underestimated him. Blaze had always been cautious. He kept multiple escape plans in place, monitored his closest members through third parties, and used layers of surveillance to protect himself. Though he never knew the full extent of Maya's betrayal, he had grown suspicious of her silence, her hesitations, the way she asked certain questions. And Blaze never confronted suspicion directly. He simply vanished. In the aftermath, Maya was placed under witness protection. Her cooperation had helped cripple the gang's structure, but not its heart. The Vultures were wounded, not destroyed. And somewhere in an unknown place, Blaze was watching. So was Ghost. Though law enforcement claimed a major victory, those who knew the streets could feel something shifting. The Crimson Vultures weren't dead. They were simply retreating, waiting, and planning their return. And for Maya Reyes, the sense of safety was temporary. Her face had changed, her name was different, but she had stolen from men who never forgave. Deep down, she knew the storm wasn't over. It was only gathering force. The city had started to breathe again. After the 2014 raids and the high-profile arrests that followed, the Crimson Vultures faded from headlines. Gang activity in East Los Angeles slowed. Rival groups began reclaiming old territory, and whispers about Blaze and Ghost became stories told in hushed tones, like urban legends meant to scare the reckless. Law enforcement believed the worst was over. But in 2017, the silence broke, and it broke violently. It began with a series of gruesome discoveries over a 3-day period. 3 rival gang leaders, each from different corners of the city, were found dead in public spaces. One was hanging from a street lamp outside a liquor store in Watts. Another was discovered tied to a bench in Echo Park. The third was found in a downtown alleyway, his body cold and stiff before sunrise. All 3 shared one disturbing detail, a red handprint marked somewhere on their body. It was the signature everyone thought they'd never see again. The Crimson Vultures were back. But this time, it wasn't Blaze at the helm. It was Ghost. Emilio, Ghost. Vargas had stepped out of the shadows and into control. His leadership marked a new phase for the gang. Blaze had ruled through order and secrecy. Ghost ruled through fear and elimination. He had no interest in the business side. He left that to trusted insiders who had stayed loyal during the purge. His focus was enforcement, revenge, restoration. Ghost restructured what was left of the Crimson Vultures into a war unit. Every member was tested for loyalty. Anyone suspected of hesitation or past betrayal vanished without a word. The new Vultures operated like a paramilitary force. Recruits were trained in isolation, exposed to surveillance countermeasures, and taught how to operate as shadows. Gone were the days of scattered crews and loose affiliations. Ghost brought in structure and brutality. Slick Rick returned too, not as a public figure but a silent architect. From a hidden location in the Pacific Northwest, he rebooted the Vultures' financial operations, now operating almost entirely through cryptocurrency. Dark web marketplaces, encrypted transactions, and offshore coin laundering replaced the old cash routes. The gang no longer needed physical banks or drop houses. Everything moved through code and anonymity. This digital transformation made the Vultures harder to trace than ever before. The FBI, already burned by the partial failure of the last operation, struggled to keep up with this new version of the gang. Their methods had changed. Their enemies had changed. But one thing remained the same. Their message was loud and clear. No one betrays the Crimson Vultures in lives. That message was delivered in the most personal way possible. Maya Rise, the woman who had helped bring down the empire, had been living under federal protection in rural Oregon. Her name was changed, her location kept secret even from extended family. For 3 years, she had lived in relative peace, believing the nightmare was behind her. But in early 2018, a burned-out car was discovered on a deserted highway outside Bend. Inside was a body burned beyond recognition. But the red handprint on the car door told the story. Ghost had found her. He always did. The killing sent a message that rattled even the highest levels of federal law enforcement. Ghost was not only back, he was unstoppable. And worse, he had learned from the past. He no longer left any trails that could be followed. He used disposable phones, avoided cameras, and relied on operatives who had no prior criminal records. Witnesses were either paid off or eliminated. Locations were changed frequently, and his top lieutenants used only code names. The return of Ghost was more than just a revival of the Crimson Vultures. It was the evolution of organized crime in California. A gang that had once ruled by secrecy was now mastering both psychological warfare and high-tech concealment. Los Angeles knew fear again. Not from open gunfights or street wars, but from the knowledge that somewhere out there, someone was watching. And if you crossed the Crimson Vultures, you wouldn't see them coming. You'd just feel the red hand. In 2022, after years of scattered violence and ghost-like operations, the Crimson Vultures made their boldest move yet. A weapons shipment from Eastern Europe, smuggled through the port of Long Beach. It was massive crates of military-grade rifles, encrypted radios, and untraceable ammunition intended to arm an entire army. But this time, their reach had grown too wide, their ambition too dangerous. Authorities intercepted the container before it left the port. It was a turning point. The moment when international law enforcement agencies finally joined forces to dismantle the Vultures once and for all. The container was traced to a fake logistics company listed under a network of offshore businesses. When the FBI unraveled the paperwork, they found a link to an old alias of Ricardo, Slick Rick, Mendoza, the gang's financial brain. This discovery triggered a flood of international cooperation. Europol, Interpol, and the U.S. Treasury began peeling back layers of shell companies. They found cryptocurrency wallets with tens of millions of dollars, hidden properties across Central America, and digital blueprints for further arms deals. While the financial web was being shredded apart, pressure grew to find the leaders who had gone underground. Ghost had disappeared once again, and Blaze had not been seen for nearly 8 years. Rumors swirled that Blaze had died in Venezuela during a cartel conflict, but no body had ever been found. Some believed he was still pulling strings from somewhere in South America, living under a new name. Others claimed Ghost had taken complete control, and Blaze had been eliminated as part of a silent coup. The break authorities needed came not from surveillance or hacking, but from within. Luca Varela, Blaze's cousin and a mid-level enforcer for the gang, was arrested during a routine traffic stop in Arizona. His car was filled with unregistered firearms, and he was already under suspicion for a weapons charge in Nevada. Facing the possibility of an 80-year sentence, Luca made a decision that would change everything. He flipped. In exchange for protection and a reduced sentence, Luca provided a roadmap to what was left of the Crimson Vultures' core operations. He revealed the location of a new headquarters hidden in the rural outskirts of Fresno, on a seemingly abandoned vineyard. Beneath the soil, Ghost had built a network of tunnels, bunkers, and safe rooms. Completely off the grid, powered by stolen generators and solar panels. There were no phone lines, no internet access, and no surface evidence of activity. It was the perfect hideout, until Luca gave it up. Federal agents launched a midnight raid. Armed to the teeth and backed by surveillance drones, they expected a bloody confrontation. Instead, they were met with eerie silence. The underground bunker was empty, the rooms cleared out with surgical precision. Documents had been burned, hard drives destroyed, and supplies taken. The only thing left behind was a red handprint smeared on a concrete wall. Ghost's way of saying they were too late. 2 months later, another breakthrough came. Slick Rick was located in Panama, trying to move funds using a fake passport. Authorities moved in quickly, capturing him before he could disappear again. His arrest led to the seizure of several offshore accounts and the dismantling of the remaining financial network. Without the money, the gang's ability to sustain large-scale operations collapsed. One by one, outposts and safehouses went dark, but Ghost remained at large. Despite international warrants, informants, and constant tracking, he vanished like smoke. Some say he retreated to South America. Others believe he's still in California, hiding in plain sight. His legend only grew stronger in absence. Former members refused to speak his name. Even from the shadows, his influence lingered. The Crimson Vultures had fallen, at least on paper. Their structure was dismantled, their leaders captured or dead, and their name no longer whispered in the same fear. But their story remained etched into California's criminal history. Because somewhere out there, Ghost still breathes, and if he returns, the Red Hand will follow.